The dig team found the first arm bone 11 inches down, then another, then a skull, curled on its side, still facing the same direction as the child beside it. 34 people, buried together in one pit, none of them laid out with care. This wasn't a cemetery. For a long time, nobody was sure what it was. Now, we mostly are, and it is one of the oldest confirmed massacres in human history. Roughly 7,000 years ago, an entire farming community outside what is now Talheim, Germany, was killed in a single event. Not raided for cattle, not defeated in a skirmish with survivors marched off. Killed, all together, and dumped into a pit that archaeologists would not open again until 1983. Here's what I find remarkable about this site. It's not the violence itself. Violence in the archaeological record is, unfortunately, not rare. It's what the bones were willing to tell us. Once someone finally asked the right questions, using tools that have nothing to do with guesswork and everything to do with chemistry, geometry, and patient comparison across hundreds of skeletons. Let's start with what was actually found. In 1983, construction workers digging a drainage ditch near Talheim uncovered human remains. The excavation that followed, led by German archaeologists and later analyzed in detail by the anthropologist Joachim Wall, revealed 34 individuals, men, women, and children, thrown into a shallow pit with no grave goods, no ritual positioning, nothing that resembled a normal, linear pottery culture burial. The linear pottery culture, often shortened to LBK by researchers, was one of the first farming societies in Central Europe, named for the incised line patterns on their pottery. These were not nomads. They built timber longhouses, kept cattle, and had lived in that valley for generations. Wall's analysis of the skeletons found something specific and hard to explain away. Blunt force trauma to the back and top of the skull, consistent with repeated blows from stone adzes, the same tool type used for woodworking in LBK villages. Several skeletons had arrowheads embedded directly in bone. The wounds were concentrated on the head and back, which forensic anthropologists generally read as a sign that these people were killed while fleeing or already incapacitated, not fighting face to face. And here is the detail that still unsettles researchers today. Genetic and demographic analysis of the group found very few adult women in their reproductive years, compared to the number of men, children, and older women present. That absence is not proof of anything on its own, but paired with similar patterns at other sites, some researchers have proposed that younger women may have been taken rather than killed, which would reframe this from a battle into something closer to a raid meant to eliminate a community while absorbing part of it. That is not settled. It is a hypothesis some anthropologists find compelling and others do not, and it deserves to be presented as exactly that, an open question, not a certainty. There's one more line of evidence worth pausing on, because it comes from a completely different kind of science. Bones don't just record trauma. They record where you grew up. A 2008 isotope study led by the archaeologist Alexander Bentley examined strontium ratios in the Massacre nature, teeth of the Talheim dead. Strontium is a trace element that enters your teeth through the local water and food supply while they're forming in childhood, and it leaves a chemical signature specific to the geology of the place you grew up in. It doesn't lie, and it doesn't change once your adult teeth are set. Bentley's team found that the isotopic signatures at Talheim were more varied than you'd expect from a single, stable farming village. Some individuals had grown up locally. Others, based on their tooth chemistry, almost certainly had not. That fits a picture in which this LBK community, like many linear pottery villages, was not an isolated island, but a hub that people, likely women in particular, moved into through marriage or exchange between neighboring settlements. It's a small, quiet kind of data, buried literally in enamel, and it's the kind of evidence that never would have existed in a Hollywood version of this story. Nobody guessed it. Nobody could have. The chemistry simply answered a question nobody 100 years ago even knew how to ask. Talheim is not alone. In 2006, a second linear pottery culture mass grave was uncovered at Schöneck-Kilienstatten, also in Germany, and analyzed in a 2015 study published by the bioarchaeologist Christian Meyer and colleagues. That site held at least 26 individuals, and the injuries told an even more specific story. Meyer's team documented deliberate fractures to the shin bones of several victims, breaks that appeared to have happened around the time of death, which some researchers interpret as evidence the victims had been restrained or immobilized before being killed. Two sites, roughly 300 years and 100 kilometers apart, showing strikingly similar patterns of violence against entire settled communities. That is not a coincidence anthropologists are comfortable ignoring. The archaeologist Rick Schulting, who has spent years cataloging skeletal trauma across Neolithic Europe, has pointed out that when you line up sites like Talheim and Schöneck-Kilienstatten with others found across France, Austria, and Scandinavia from roughly the same few thousand years, a pattern starts to emerge that's bigger than any single village. Head wounds concentrated on the back and left side of the skull, which is what you'd expect from a right-handed attacker, striking someone from behind or from the side. Arrow wounds clustered on torsos and limbs, almost no healed, older fractures of the same kind, which tells researchers these were not communities with a long simmering habit of internal violence, but ones that experienced a sudden, catastrophic event, and then, in most cases, simply ceased to exist as a settlement afterward. So let's reconstruct what a day might have looked like. Right before. Picture a longhouse village on a river terrace, timber walls, thatched roofs, fields of emmer wheat and barley, planted in the same soil their parents had farmed. Cattle penned near the houses. Children old enough to help with grinding grain, too young to help with much else. Someone repairing a roof beam, someone else scraping a hide. A woman who, based on that isotope evidence, may have arrived here years earlier from another valley entirely, now simply part of the village, no different in any way you could see from someone born there. This was not a precarious, day-to-day existence. Farming had given these people something foragers rarely had: a fixed address, stored surplus, and a reason to stay exactly where they were, generation after generation. Their grandparents had cleared this land. Their children were meant to inherit it. And that is precisely what made them a target that a mobile group never could have been. You cannot ambush people who have already moved on. You can ambush people who have nowhere else to go, and no reason to expect they'd ever need one. Here's the counterintuitive twist, and it's one that upends a comfortable assumption a lot of people carry into this topic. There's a popular idea that farming made humans gentler, that settling down and growing food domesticated not just crops, but people. The archaeological record does not support a clean version of that story. If anything, the emergence of stored surplus, fixed territory, and visible wealth appears, at some sites, to correlate with organized, lethal violence between entire communities, not less of it. Researchers studying pre-agricultural societies have found evidence of interpersonal violence too. At Natharuk, in modern-day Kenya, a 2016 study led by the paleoanthropologist Marta Mirazon-Lar documented the remains of at least 27 hunter-gatherers, dated to roughly 10,000 years ago, showing blunt force trauma and, in some cases, embedded stone projectile points. So violence between human groups did not begin with farming, but farming may have changed its shape. It gave people something worth defending and something worth taking. A field cannot run. A granary cannot be relocated overnight. Once you have something fixed and valuable, you also have something an enemy can target with total predictability. Researchers are still split on how much weight to put on this pattern, and it's worth being honest about that disagreement, rather than picking a side and presenting it as settled. Some, like the archaeologist Lawrence Keeley, have argued that prehistoric warfare has been systematically underestimated by earlier generations of scholars who wanted to see the past as more peaceful than it was than the evidence actually supports. Others, including the anthropologist Douglas Fry, have pushed back hard against reading a small number of dramatic sites as proof that organized warfare was common or inevitable across prehistory. Fry's argument is that a handful of extreme cases, however striking, can end up standing in for a much more varied and often far less violent reality that simply left less behind for archaeologists to find. Both perspectives are working from the same limited set of physical evidence, and both are making a reasonable point. Skeletal trauma survives. Peaceful centuries do not leave marks on bone. That means the archaeological record is, by its nature, better at preserving evidence of violence than evidence of its absence, which should make anyone cautious about extrapolating too far from any single site, Talheim included. What can be said with more confidence is narrower and more specific. At this particular place, in this particular window of time, an entire settled community was killed in a single coordinated event, and the physical evidence for that specific claim is about as strong as prehistoric archaeology gets. What happened at Talheim was not chaos. The pattern of wounds, the missing women, the total absence of any defensive structure at the settlement, all of it points towards something organized, deliberate, and fast. Whoever did this was not looking for a fight. They were looking for an ending. We don't know who attacked Talheim. We don't know if it was a rival farming community competing for the same fertile valley, or something else entirely. What we do know is written in the bones themselves, in the exact angle of a fracture, in an arrowhead lodged where a struggle should have deflected it, in the simple fact that this was not a burial, it was a disposal. 7,000 years later, we still organize our lives around fixed addresses, stored resources, and the assumption that where we live and what we've built will still be there tomorrow. You lock a door at night. You keep food in a refrigerator instead of hunting for it that same day. You pay for a mortgage on the belief that this specific plot of land will still belong to you in 30 years. And in most places, for most people reading this, that belief is a safe one to hold. It wasn't always. The very things that make a settled life comfortable, permanence, accumulation, a fixed place to belong to, are the same things that once made a community identifiable, predictable, and, to the wrong group, at the wrong moment, worth eliminating rather than simply raiding. That's not a reason to feel unsafe in your own home tonight. 7,000 years of continued settlement is itself evidence that whatever happened at Talheim was the exception, not the rule. But it is worth remembering, at least once, that the sense of permanence a settled life gives you is, historically speaking, a fairly recent bet, and not one every community that came before you was allowed to keep. The first arm bone the excavators found in that drainage ditch in 1983 belonged to someone who woke up on an ordinary morning in a house their family had probably lived in for years, with no reason to think that day would be different from the one before it.